Clashes and fistfights broke out in Germany's Hanover airport on Monday during a demonstration against Turkey's military operation in Syria. In the video, protesters can be seen holding signs and flags of Iraqi Kurdistan, red, white and green, and the Rojava, yellow, red and green, and can be heard chanting fascist Erdogan. Rojava is the Kurdish name for northern Syria. Around 20 people were involved in the dispute, with 2 suffering minor injuries. The situation was quickly brought under control. Turkey launched a cross-border attack on Saturday on the region of Afrin, aiming to crush the YPG, a Syrian Kurdish militia that has been the principal military ally of the United States on the ground against Islamic State.
نرفض نهج الامريكان نرفض نهج الامريكان حيي امريكا راس الحيي والقصه بتبدا من بعيد والقصه بتبدا تعمل ايه والسفاره بتعمل ايه وكل الطاقم CIA كل الطاقم
להיות ישיבה מלאכתו.
عشان عفرين حرر عفرين كل الشعب الكرد مع عفرين
YPG und YPG, die zugleich zu den schlagfertigsten Einheiten
Andernfalls müssten die Beziehungen zur Türkei, und ich freue mich jetzt ganz besonders, das ist mir ein Herzensanliegen, wenn ich links von euch ziehe, höre überall
Der hält sich nicht.
Sozialdemokratische fehlt hier vollends. Im migrationspolitischen Teil
heute einen tollen Tag. Ja, und ich hoffe,
Generation of American colonialism. Who experienced
Mi dicevano gli attivisti, i pacifisti, il fratellino morto sulle spalle. Ora noi abbiamo questa modernizzazione
What do we want? When do we want it? Now. Hey, hey. Ho-ho. Are you in the basket? No KKK, no fascist USA! No Trump! No KKK, no fascist USA!
On the day he would become the first US vice president to address Israel's parliament, the Knesset, Mike Pence was greeted with almost presidential ceremony by Israel's prime minister. He didn't take long to return the favor.
my great honor, on behalf of the President of the United States, to be in Israel's capital, Jerusalem.
It was a description of Jerusalem that Pence would repeat 3 times during his set-piece event. But not before he was interrupted by Israeli-Palestinian members of the Knesset decrying the US position and any prospect of US involvement in the peace process. Their enforced departure cleared the way for Pence to speak to 2 other audiences, Israelis and US evangelical Christians, for whom the Jerusalem Declaration was a major campaign pledge.
In the weeks ahead, our administration will advance its plan to open the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. And that United States Embassy will open before the end of next year.
Pence has said that his faith largely determines his long-standing backing for Israel. This speech fused that religiosity with, as offered, the near-total political support of the Trump administration for the government of the watching Benjamin Netanyahu, including its position on Iran.
I have a solemn promise to Israel, to all the Middle East, and to the world. The United States of America will never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon.
He said the US would back a 2-state solution if both Israelis and Palestinians agreed and Israel's security could be guaranteed, and put the onus on the Palestinians to come to the table.
Mr. Trump gave them Jerusalem. I mean, what an honest broker that is, who wants the deal of the century, in which Jerusalem plays a major role.
Above all, this speech threw into sharp relief the different realities which the United States and Israel on one side and the Palestinian leadership on the other are now operating in. For Palestinians, this was further damage after Donald Trump's December declaration, further evidence the United States could not be an honest broker. For Israeli ministers, they were calling it emotional, inspiring, even Zionist. Netanyahu later added his voice, calling it a magnificent speech, in particular complimenting its focus on what he called the evil regime in Iran.
It was a powerful expression of the enduring bond between our 2 countries and of your personal commitment to Israel, the commitment of President Trump and your entire delegation.
On the first full day of his visit, Mike Pence has earned the fulsome praise of his hosts and the ever stronger rejection by Palestinian leadership of any US role in the resolution of this conflict. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Climate change took its toll on 2017, making it one of the warmest years on record, and the U.S. most expensive disaster year ever. As the warming trend continues, researchers are exploring if solar geoengineering might slow it down, but they're finding it might actually do more harm than good. Solar geoengineering involves reflecting more sunlight back into space so the planet cools down. Scientists think if it's done together with reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, it might offset some of the effects of climate change. One of the most popular and feasible methods involves spraying sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere to form a cloud that would reflect solar radiation. This is similar to what happens during large volcanic eruptions. Models have shown this technique might not only help cool the planet, but could also reduce melting of sea and land ice, slow down sea level rise, and make it easier for plants to absorb carbon dioxide. But the risks might outweigh the benefits. Some models show if we start sulfur seeding and then abruptly stop for some reason, the planet might actually begin rapidly heating up, far faster than if seeding hadn't been used at all. The warming could be disastrous for ecosystems, especially fragile ones in the polar regions. Other studies have found sulfur seeding might also lead to substantial ozone depletion, reversing the slow natural repairs to the ozone hole above Antarctica. So before we go spraying aerosols into the sky, we might want to seriously weigh as many risks and benefits as we can. Scientists won't know all of geoengineering's implications until it's underway.
Most of the world's volcanoes are found around the Pacific Ocean's Ring of Fire, a meeting point of tectonic plates and an area of intense seismic activity. Tectonic plates are massive slabs of rock making up the Earth's surface. Constantly moving on a hotbed of magma, volcanoes form in two ways at their boundaries. Plates sometimes collide, causing one to slide beneath the other. This is called a destructive boundary. Pressure and heat created by this movement force magma up into the cracks in the rocks until it explodes to the surface as lava, causing a volcanic eruption. Molten rock, debris and gases from the Earth's interior are also emitted, either from the main crater or from secondary vents. Plates can also move away from each other at so-called constructive boundaries. In this case, magma rises to fill the gap, creating a new crust. When this happens under the sea, volcanic islands are eventually formed. Volcanic activity can also occur underneath tectonic plates in areas known as hotspots, when magma escapes through localized melted molten rock. In terms of activity, volcanoes are extinct when they haven't erupted for tens of thousands of years, dormant when they're temporarily inert, and active when they regularly churn out gas or lava.
Schools were closed and flights were canceled in Albay province as the Philippines' most active volcano threatens large eruption. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, PHIVOLCS, has raised the alert level for Mount Mayon from 3 to 4 after it spewed a tower of ash column on Monday, January 22nd. Level 4 alert means imminent hazardous eruption, which PHIVOLCS say can happen within weeks or even days. PHIVOLCS extended the permanent danger zone to an 8-kilometer radius. Mount Mayon has been acting up since January 13th. Since then, some 40,000 people have been evacuated, and the province of Albay has been placed under state of calamity. Albay's governor has advised residents to stay at home and be alert. According to PHIVOLCS records, Mount Mayon has erupted 51 times since 1616, the latest one in 2014. For United News International, I'm Mila Uni.
A tsunami warning was issued after a magnitude 7.9 earthquake struck in the Gulf of Alaska. The major earthquake struck roughly 175 miles southeast of Kodiak, Alaska, early Tuesday. The U.S. Geological Survey initially recorded its strength as a magnitude 8.2, but later revised the reading. As of early Tuesday, there have been no reports of damage, but the quake did cause a tsunami. The National Weather Service issued a tsunami warning initially, but later downgraded it to a tsunami advisory, only impacting parts of the Alaska coast. A tsunami watch for the entire west coast of the U.S. was also canceled. Officials recommend those in the advisory area should stay out of the water and move away from the coastline.
O sea, ¿qué tipo de agua estamos nosotros generando y qué tipo de condiciones ambientales estamos provocando? Realmente estamos creando un colapso ambiental, estamos generando una situación que realmente nos va a costar carísimo, le va a costar carísimo a nuestras futuras generaciones, porque lo que les vamos a heredar es un ambiente invivible.
Children of the Asmat tribe in Papua, barely alive. Their bodies exhausted and weak from hunger and disease. Undernourished, they're battling against outbreaks of measles and chickenpox. Military medical teams have arrived in some remote areas. Maria Epam and her husband Linus had to travel for 5 hours and feared their 6-month-old daughter would not survive.
Our daughter has been in this bad condition for quite a while, but only now have people come to our village to help.
Ella Kakaer is 5 years old, but her body is less than half the size of a healthy child her age. Villagers say 29 children in her village alone have died.
We rowed our boats to a health post in another village, but when we arrived, they rejected us. Some of our children made it there alive, but some died. We buried them there. Others died on the way. We buried them next to the river.
Villagers tell us that local authorities never visited their village even after a measles outbreak was reported last September.
Yes, we have very limited means and staff, but this doesn't mean we are trying very hard. What we need is not just to be criticised, but real help. Those who criticise us, I want to invite to work here.
Church officials estimate hundreds of children of the Asmat tribe have died so far, but many deaths have not been reported.
My question is, does anyone really care about these children who are dying? Does anyone want to go there and get real data about their condition? And why do we only now say this is a problem?
The Asmat tribe is best known for its past history of headhunting and cannibalism and living off the forest. But introduced to modern life and money, they are struggling to survive without government aid. For 4 months, they desperately have tried to find help, but their cries to save their children's lives fell on deaf ears. This health crisis shows that government assistance is not reaching poor Papuans living in these forgotten parts of the archipelago. While help has come for these Asmat children, many others remain in their remote villages. Their only hope is help will arrive in time. Step Vassen, Al Jazeera, Agats, Papua.
Nearly every child in Yemen needs humanitarian assistance. That's what UNICEF notes in its latest report. Adults don't fare any better, but what's perhaps worse is their inability to take care of their ailing loved ones.
This hospital is very crowded. We cannot get the needed medicines. For this very reason, we buy some medicines from outside. We want the government to help this hospital, just to improve the general medical conditions.
This is just one of 2 state hospitals left in Yemen's coastal Hodeidah province. But doctors cannot offer much, as the hospital has run out of money.
There is a noticeable increase in malnutrition cases due to the blockade and the aggression. Many hospitals have become out of service in Hodeidah. This has placed a major burden on this hospital. There are no medicines and no treatment for tumours or kidney failure. The blockade has caused a scarcity of equipment. We have made urgent appeals for finding a solution. Medicines are very expensive now. Prices have skyrocketed due to the deteriorating economic conditions, and the blockade has added fuel to the fire.
It's been almost 3 years since that fire began, with the Saudi-led coalition bombing Houthi rebels in 2015. The conflict has since destroyed buildings, infrastructure, and lives. The humanitarian situation here in Yemen is considered one of the worst in the world. Yemenis are now encircled by starvation, poverty, and illness.
I used to have a dialysis treatment twice a week, but now because of the blockade, the crowd at the hospital, and the lack of medicine, I only have the treatment once a week.
The UN has called for the lifting of the blockade and unconditional access for humanitarian aid. But it seems the chance of that happening here is as little as getting proper medical treatment. Rahul Radhakrishnan, TRT World.
The UN says $3 billion will be needed if Yemeni children are to stop eating out of dumpsters. That money will also be used to provide health, sanitation, and basic necessities to 11 million people desperate for humanitarian aid. Half of that $3 billion has been promised by Saudi Arabia as it continues to carry out attacks in Yemen. It's targeting Houthi rebels, but rights groups say most of those dying are civilians.
It's not just the people who die directly because of the war and the conflict itself, it's those people who die those silent deaths in their villages or in their towns where they haven't been able to access good health or access medical facilities and die from preventable diseases, especially children.
The conflict in Yemen is complicated. The calm in the port city of Aden deceptively hides a political storm brewing between opposing parties supported by the same coalition. UAE-backed southern secessionists are threatening the Saudi-backed and internationally recognized government. The secessionists have fought for control of air and sea ports. Now southern forces led by the man appointed by President Hadi as the governor of Aden have announced the beginning of the process to overthrow the Hadi government.
We reject the deployment of any northern forces to the south. While we appreciate their military role and the necessity of forming northern resistance forces to fight the Houthis in the north.
Aden is the de facto capital of the Hadi government, but President Hadi has been based in Saudi Arabia due to security concerns. His Prime Minister Ahmed bin Dagher has struggled to control southern Yemen despite support from Saudi Arabia. The US gives logistical guidance at the Saudi military headquarters in Riyadh, as well as selling them weapons. Russia also wants a role in Yemen, but there's concern based on other Middle Eastern conflicts it would tilt in favor of the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. Russia insists it just wants peace. In the complicated chessboard of war, babies are dying of hunger. Yemenis just want it to end, regardless of who can make that happen. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
For Abdul Fayez and his wife Shajita, it doesn't matter whether the start of the Myanmar and Bangladeshi government's repatriation plan has been delayed. They say they would not have agreed to return to Myanmar anyway.
If we die here, at least we get a funeral. If we are killed in Myanmar, there is no funeral. The dead are just burnt.
We must be recognised as Rohingya. We want our houses rebuilt and freedom of movement. If they kill us in Myanmar, they just burn the bodies. They even throw children into the fire, some as young as my son.
Bangladesh says the list it has compiled of the names of more than 1 million refugees has not yet been submitted to the Myanmar government. The agreed plan would then involve Myanmar verifying the names of each refugee on that list before giving it back to Bangladesh authorities, who will then ask refugees if they want to return. The Rohingya had their citizenship withdrawn in what was then Burma 35 years ago. The Myanmar government considers them illegal immigrants. Aid agencies say Myanmar soldiers and armed gangs killed thousands of men, women and children in recent months, a situation described by the UN as ethnic cleansing. The Myanmar government has denied the claim, banned any independent investigation, and says temporary shelters are ready for the refugees it allows to return. The idea of asking Rohingya refugees, many of whom have seen their family members killed and their homes destroyed, if they want to voluntarily return to Myanmar now, has been described by aid agencies and rights groups as a farce. The United Nations says the basic conditions which made the Rohingya so vulnerable to decades of persecution and violence inside Myanmar remain the same. The United Nations Refugee Agency says 3 things are vital in any future repatriation process.
And the first thing is they need to see the citizenship issue, legal status, resolved in Myanmar, a critical issue. The second thing is they need to be able to go back in conditions that are safe and secure. And number 3, they need to be able to go back to a home, to a village that's been reconstructed, a place to live.
The Bangladesh government says it's vital any repatriation process is voluntary and safe. But Western governments say the Rohingya's security cannot be guaranteed. And the UN's Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, banned from entering Myanmar, says those responsible for the killing and destruction must be called to account. Abdul Fayez says his father was hacked to death by a gang of men as he tried to flee their village. He doubts anyone will ever be punished for that. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, Kutupalong refugee camp, Bangladesh.
2-year-old Kabongo Tumba, his mother Mubaka, and 3 siblings spent 2 months on the road from their village to Kasai Central's capital, Kananga, with little to eat. They had fled the fighting between government forces and the Kamoin and Sapo rebels, which was adding to communal conflict that already existed. It's been a month since they arrived, and both mother and son still have symptoms of malnutrition.
It was very hard walking so long with my children. At some point, I couldn't walk at all. If it wasn't for the help of the people we were with in the forest, I would have died.
At another nutrition center, mothers bring their children to get weighed and for food and medicine. Chidibi Mutombo's distended belly, discolored hair, and lethargic state are obvious signs that he needs assistance. Humanitarian agencies say about 400,000 children in this region are malnourished, and more than 3 million people are facing starvation because they've been unable to plant crops for 3 seasons.
It's quite difficult to see the scale of the crisis in Kasai because most of the affected are in far villages that are hard to access. People who had fled to the forest but are now coming back home, and those who are still displaced. Aid workers say they need much help.
Let's not forget this has been a protection crisis, and right now when the conflict has been dispersed in certain areas, we start seeing very difficult cases of children that had seen a lot of atrocities committed on their parents. We've seen children that have had to witness how their parents were killed in front of them.
People here are now receiving some aid, but in this area last year, dozens of people were killed. The Catholic Church put in the figure for the entire Kasai region since the conflict began at around 3,000, both rebels and government forces accused of the killings.
I do not want to go back to my home village. My house is destroyed. My children were killed there. How can I return?
At the center in Kananga, we are told Chidibi is going to be all right. He'll get all the medical and nutritional help he needs. The big concern is that many other children won't be so fortunate because aid agencies don't have enough resources to go around. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Kasai Central in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
3 people have died and a further 22 are injured following an explosion in southern Thailand. The motorcycle bomb was placed in a market in the Yala province. It ripped off the market's corrugated roof and destroyed nearby stalls. No group has come forward to claim responsibility for the attack.
At least 16 people have been killed in rocket fire and airstrikes across Yemen. Here in Sadr, in the northwest of the country, at least 7 reportedly died as a house was bombarded by the Saudi-led coalition. In the southwestern city of Taiz, Houthi rebel rocket fire killed at least 9, including a journalist, according to a government official. The fresh violence came as Russia called for a diplomatic solution to the conflict. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned political dialogue needed to replace military intervention in the nearly 3-year civil war. The United Nations has labelled the situation in Yemen the worst man-made humanitarian crisis of current times. On Sunday, it launched the 2018 Yemen Humanitarian Response Plan, offering what it says is the only lifeline for millions of the population. The worst affected, the UN reports, are the children. Nearly 2 million are out of school, and 1.8 million under the age of 5 are acutely malnourished.
نو بجه شب بودن که صدای فایر شنیدم. ما دویدم طرف دهلیز خود از یک مسیر بکشم. اما کارمند هتل دیدم و کارمند هتل گفتن که انتحاری داخل هتل شده، شما باید در اتاقایتان باشین. پس من رفتم مستقیما داخل اتاق، وسایل برقی بودن، تلویزیون بودن، بخاری بودن، کلیشان خاموش کردم، داخل تشناب رفتم. بعد از حدود 10 دقیقه کمتری بیشتری انتحاری به دروازه ما رسیدن، چند فایر هم کردن، خوشبختانه داخل تشناب نشد.
ما یک دوست مرحوم به یک اتاق از منزل تا پایین انداختیم و شهادت بسیار افرادی بدون یک اتاق دیدیم از منزل خود پایین انداختن طبقه 4 و 5 پایین انداختن شهید شدن آمدن. این هتل و فعلا بسیاری مهمانایی که در هتل هم در هتل بودن در عنوان یک شخصی دارم.
On January 20th, the Turkish Armed Forces, TAF, officially launched a military operation in the area of Afrin and started conducting massive artillery and airstrikes on positions of Kurdish militias there. Operation Olive Branch has been started on January 20, 2018 at 5 p.m. in Syria's northwestern Afrin region to establish security and stability of our borders and region, to eliminate terrorists of PKK, KCK, PYD, YPG, and Daesh, ISIS, and to save our friends and brothers from their oppression and cruelty, the General Staff said in an official statement. The Russian military relocated its forces deployed in Afrin to ensure the security of Russian servicemen located in the district. The country's defense ministry added in an official statement that uncontrolled deliveries of modern weapons, including reportedly the deliveries of man-portable air defense systems by the Pentagon to the pro-US forces in northern Syria, have contributed to the rapid escalation of tensions in the region and resulted in the launch of a special operation by the Turkish troops. On January 21st at 11:05 a.m., units of the TAF and Turkish-backed groups of the Free Syrian Army FSA started a ground phase of the operation. The operation will have 4 stages. There will be a 30-kilometer buffer zone, Prime Minister Binali Yildirim said on the same day. According to pro-Turkish sources, the TAF and the FSA captured the villages of Adnan Monli, Bulalkuy, and Kurin, as well as captured 4 hills in the district of Sheikh al-Hadid and Rajo. The advance is supported by warplanes, Bayraktar TB2, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, T-122 Sakarya multiple launch rocket systems, various artillery pieces, and armored vehicles, including Leopard 2A4 battle tanks. About 200 positions of YPG-YPJ were destroyed by strikes, according to pro-Turkish sources. In response, the YPG General Command said that no villages were captured by the TAF, and all attacks were repelled. Pro-Kurdish sources also claim that 15 members of pro-Turkish forces were killed, and 3 TAF battle tanks were destroyed with anti-tank guided missiles, ATGM. The YPG released a video of an ATGM strike of a Leopard 2A4 battle tank. However, the photo of the same tank later appeared online, showing that it was only slightly damaged. According to pro-YPG sources, 11 civilians were killed, and 16 others were injured by Turkish strikes. Separately, YPG-led forces shelled Reyhanli district of the Turkish province of Hatay with at least 11 rockets. A civilian was killed and about 50 others were injured. The YPG also accused Russia of allowing Turkey to attack Afrin and said that Moscow will be responsible for all civilian casualties there. It's interesting to note that, according to reports, just before the start of the TAF operation, the YPG and its political branch, PYD, once again rejected a Russian-Syrian suggestion to allow the Damascus government administrative bodies to return back to Afrin. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis said Turkey informed the U.S. about the operation ahead of its start and added that Ankara has legitimate security concerns. The TAF operation in Afrin came amid a total collapse of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's defense in Idlib province. On January 20th, the Syrian Arab Army SAA, the Tiger forces and their allies liberated the Abu al-Duhur air base and a large number of the nearby villages. In this way, the SAA fully encircled remaining forces of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS and ISIS in eastern Idlib and northwestern Aleppo. HTS launched a series of small-scale counterattacks and targeted an SAA position of Sarouj with a car bomb, but was not able to stop the government advance. On January 21st, government forces advanced north of the airbase and entered the town of Abu al-Duhur. On January 22nd, the SAA liberated this key town and continued the operation to consolidate its recent gains. Meanwhile, fierce fighting continued in Afrin. Kurdish forces in the area faced the same problem from which their Peshmerga counterparts suffered in Kirkuk. They de facto rejected close cooperation with all players except of the US, but Washington is now rushing to help.
Up to 1,000 more U.S. troops could be headed to Afghanistan this spring. On January 21st, the Washington Post reported that the Army is preparing a proposal that would send an additional 1,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan to boost its forces in the region and help in the fight against the Taliban. The new troops would be part of a new combat team called the Security Force Assistance Brigade. Those forces would join the 14,000 U.S. troops already stationed there. The possible move underscores the stark contrast between the Obama and Trump administrations' Afghanistan strategies. While the Obama administration pushed for a drawdown of U.S. troops in Afghanistan, President Trump's plan for the war has already increased the number of troops by 5,500 since he took office, not counting this new proposal. For United News International in Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin May. The U.S. State Department has cleared the sale of dozens of F-35 Joint Strike Fighters to Belgium in a deal worth $6.53 billion. The State Department announced on January 19th that it had approved the sale of 34 F-35As, along with spare engines, electronic warfare systems, and a full mission trainer to the European nation. According to a statement from the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, the proposed sale will, quote, provide Belgium with a credible defense capability to deter aggression in the region and ensure interoperability with U.S. forces. The F-35, built and designed by Lockheed Martin, is the most expensive weapons program in history. Several U.S. allies have already bought the jet, including Japan, Israel, the United Kingdom, Australia, Norway, Italy, and Turkey. For United News International in Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Once again, stress that the country's missile program is non-negotiable. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Bahram Qasemi described Iran's defense program as a red line which no one will be allowed to cross. This came after France said Tehran and Paris had started negotiations on Iran's missile program. The Iranian diplomat dismissed the claim. Meanwhile, France has accused Iran of not respecting part of a UN Security Council resolution that demands it refrain from working on ballistic missiles designed to carry nuclear warheads. The Islamic Republic has repeatedly said its missile program is entirely defensive and poses no threat to anyone.
Britain's army chief has warned that a lack of investment could jeopardize the country's ability to withstand attack from Russia. The intervention by General Sir Nick Carter was unprecedented. Normally, military chiefs keep their heads well below the political parapet.
Russia, I think, could initiate hostilities sooner than we expect, and a lot earlier than we would in similar circumstances. Most likely, they will use nefarious sub-NATO Article 5 treaty actions to erode the capability of NATO and threaten the very structure that provides our own defence and security. This is the divide and rule which the international order is designed to prevent.
He said the Kremlin already boasted an eye-watering quantity of capability, as demonstrated by ostentatious war games held under the international gaze in recent years. By contrast, the British military has increasingly outdated equipment and a black hole in its budget, with further deep cuts planned for the coming years.
Japan is escalating efforts to prepare its citizens for war, with Tokyo hosting its first ballistic missile evacuation drill. It seems Japan is still fearful of North Korea, despite tensions easing on the peninsula over the Winter Olympics. Hundreds of Tokyo residents wore grey bibs and prepared to seek underground shelter as about 200 employees blared an ominous warning that a missile had been launched. Several other Japanese cities have already undergone similar drills in recent weeks, but it was a first for the capital. However, some seemed sceptical that such a drill could go very far in preparing for the worst. There were also a few protests outside places where Monday's drill was conducted, with demonstrators saying the drills were only fanning missile fears.
Now, while friendly talks are taking place between the two Koreas, international pressure continues to build on the North. The European Union has put an additional 17 North Koreans on its blacklist, hitting them with travel bans and asset freezes for illegal trading activities and sidestepping sanctions imposed on Pyongyang over its nuclear program. The EU says the 17 were identified due to their involvement in illegal trade activities and activities aimed at facilitating the evasion of UN sanctions. The new additions are mostly senior company representatives, not high-ranking government officials. There are now 58 North Koreans and 10 entities, such as companies and organizations under EU sanctions, and a further 79 people and 54 entities on the UN list. North Korea is only a handful of months away from being capable of striking the mainland United States with a nuclear weapon. This, according to the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. The latest assessment by Mike Pompeo comes after the North tested 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles and conducted its 6th nuclear weapon test last year. In an interview with CBS aired on Monday, Pompeo said North Korea's nuclear weapons program is continuing to expand, advance, become more powerful, more capable and more reliable. He added that Washington is working diligently to extend that timeline.
Watch this doctor turn a baby that's still in his mother's belly.
I was like, well, let me get this just for us and we can document it.
Nick and Vanessa Fisher were told their baby was breech, meaning his head hadn't turned downward toward the birth canal and he risked being born feet first. They did try some home remedies to coax him into position.
We would put headphones in my pockets and try to get the baby to get curious and try to listen down at the bottom. We got out the ironing board and I would lay on the ironing board upside down. But none of those things worked. He stayed put.
Their midwife recommended they visit Dr. Frederick Cumming, an OB-GYN, to try to get their little guy ready for his big debut. Nick Fisher decided to record the procedure.
I felt a little pain, but it happened very quickly. I was really surprised at how easily it happened. And when he was finished, and I was so relieved because as soon as he was finished, he checked the baby's heart rate and everything was fine and all was well. So I was really happy.
They decided to share their video on Facebook so others who might be in their position could see what the procedure is all about. And it seemed lots of people were interested to see it.
I didn't ever imagine 3 million people would watch it, but it's great that we did because it served its purpose, and happy to help.
And the Fishers report their baby, Ashton Nathaniel, was born naturally at home on January 16.